joined by our strong Liberal team, and particularly the next Member of Parliament for right here in Burnaby South, Neelam Brar. Congratulations. Les dernières semaines ont été pas mal
The recent weeks have been very busy. We were going right across the country with our Liberal team with announcements and rallies. We met with workers and families, and we talked about our plan to help the middle class.
Today, I want to take a bit of time to reflect on our Liberal vision for the future of Canada. A vision that moves Canada forward and does so by tackling the most fundamental challenge facing our generation, climate change. Last Friday, we saw historic demonstrations for climate action in cities around the world. More than 4 million people participated in climate strikes from Germany to Uganda, from Australia to Bangladesh. People young and old showed up to demand leadership and change. But we shouldn't be surprised. We are living in a breathtaking, pivotal moment. Citizens are coming to a major realization. The climate crisis is real, and people are waking up. And it's because young people, led by the likes of 16-year-old Greta Thunberg, are driving the conversation. They've seen the science. Things are now more urgent than ever before. They've seen the impact, with floods and fires destroying entire communities, with forced migration, with dwindling air quality, with species extinction. And these kids are scared because they know this will become their mess to clean up. Climate change has been a catalyst for some tough but inspiring conversations with my own kids, who, like so many of their friends, just seem to get it. Unfortunately, not everyone can say the same. Some politicians, usually in conservative parties, throw their hands up and say, "There's nothing we can do." They recoil, falling back on the approach they know best, neglecting our environment and pretending climate change isn't real. Or, if you're former Conservative Finance Minister Joe Oliver, you admit that climate change is real, then you turn around and insist it's a good thing for Canada. But here's what we as Liberals say. The climate crisis is real, but we can't waste any more time. Conservative leaders have wasted enough. It will take courage and planning, grassroots leadership, and government investment. But if we mitigate and adapt, we can win the fight against climate change. And we can lead that fight from right here in Canada. In fact, we have to, since our country's warming nearly twice as fast as the rest of the world.
Whether you want to discover the Rockies or the Gros Morne Park, or whether you want to spend time at your cottage in the Laurentians, or outside in nature, all of that is part of our Canadian identity. Canadians therefore understand full well the importance of protecting our environment. Sometimes that requires a lot of work. But you know that it also requires work to remove acid rain and to provide universal health care and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But Canadians are used to tackling the issues they're confronted with, coming together and getting down to work. We don't recoil when we see a major challenge or when things get tough. If you're a Liberal, it's only an additional reason to act quickly.
Years from now, I want to look my kids in the eyes and say, we stepped up in the fight against climate change. And we've already started the hard work. Our plan isn't perfect, but we're making real progress. Putting a price on pollution, protecting our oceans, phasing out coal, banning single-use plastics. These aren't piecemeal policies, but crucial parts of a larger plan. Businesses are stepping up too. but not fast enough. We need them to act, because as a government and as citizens, we can't do it alone. We have to move faster than ever before. We have to stay hungry for change. We have to keep going. So a re-elected Liberal government will keep moving Canada forward. Canada is on track to reduce our emissions by 30% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. And just this morning, we committed to exceeding this target and to joining countries around the world in reaching net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. That means not putting any more carbon emissions into the air than we take out. This will be a huge opportunity for Canadians. It'll require us to slash our emissions, transform our economy, and use the power of nature, like planting trees and protecting ecosystems, to bring us to net zero. It's an ambitious target, but it's doable. Here in Canada, we'll appoint a group of experts to help us chart a path forward, and we'll legislate 5-year targets along the way. We will hit net zero by 2050, not only because we can, but because we must. And a big part of our plan to get to net zero includes creating an economic ecosystem where clean tech companies can thrive. The global clean tech economy is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. And so the clean tech market is exploding. This is the way the world is going. This is the next great economic frontier. Companies and countries are already innovating. They see what's coming, and they want in, not only to curb the impacts of climate change, but to capitalize. But conservatives want to bury their heads in the sand, denying the science and hoping that other countries will step up. They have no plan to reduce emissions. They have no plan for jobs. They have no plan for the future. All they've done is drive innovators away. Liberals, on the other hand, want Canada to lead in the global clean tech race. We want to drive that solution. That's why a re-elected Liberal government will cut corporate tax in half for zero-emissions clean tech companies. This would include, for example, companies building battery technology for electric vehicles, or those working on next-generation solar panels. We have the talent, we have the vision, and we already have the reputation as the best place in the world to start and grow a clean tech business. A
Liberal government will reduce by half taxes for clean technology companies that are zero emission. That would apply to companies that produce batteries for vehicles, or who are imagining the new generation of solar panels. In Canada, we have the talent and the vision and the reputation to be the best country to lead clean tech technology. When we move forward with our country, we have to make sure that no one is left behind. So we will introduce legislation on a just transition that will ensure that workers have access to training and supports that they need to succeed in a greener economy. Now, this legislation was introduced at the Paris Conference on Climate Change, and now Canada will become one of the first countries in the world to make it a reality. Once introduced, that legislation will help our communities to exceed not only now, but for generations to come. Together, we can continue to move this country forward. Together, we can continue to build a country where clean tech companies are prosperous, where citizens can make greener choices, and where our workers can thrive as we move forward with this environmental transition.
Here's the reality. The major policy discussions ahead of us will be centered around mitigating climate change. This is a fact. This is our great global challenge. Politicians, academics, scientists, entrepreneurs, Canadians, we will all be seized with it. So here's the question you have to ask yourself. Do you want to be represented by a team that has a serious, ambitious plan and is committed to doing more? Or do you want a team of climate deniers with no long-term vision for Canada's environmental and economic future? Conservatives want to take us backwards, to make pollution free again. This isn't an exaggeration. They've told Canadians that that's what they'll do. They ignore climate change because they don't think it's an economic issue. But they couldn't be more wrong. You pay for climate change when your basement floods, or when the highway washes out and you can't make it to your shift. You pay for climate change when you're facing higher insurance premiums, or when tourists skip your town because the smoke from neighboring forest fires is too much. You pay when a drought devastates your crops, and you pay when deadly heat waves paralyze your city for days. Climate change is already making life more expensive for Canadians. We have to take it seriously, and that starts with setting ambitious but essential goals and outlining how we're going to get there. We're not just investing in clean tech and public transit and climate-resilient infrastructure. We're investing in Canada's future. We're investing in our kids, and we're investing in a better tomorrow. Here's the long and the short of it. Our plan creates jobs and reduces pollution. The Conservative plan will cost more and do less. Doug Ford, Jason Kenney, Andrew Scheer. This generation of Conservative politicians are all the same when it comes to the environment. They just don't care, and they just don't get it.
Our children will have difficult questions for us about climate change. Conservatives have no answers. We do. We must do more, and we will do more.
In this election, Canadians are faced with an important choice. Will we move backwards, or will we stand together and choose forward? Here is our promise as Liberals. We won't give tax breaks to the 1% or to big polluters, but we will make life more affordable and fight climate change. That's what we're offering, a real plan for families and for the future. I'm for moving forward, for our planet, for our kids, for everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Good morning, Salima Shivji, CBC News. Your plan offers very few details on how Canada will get to this ambitious goal of net zero emissions by 2050. Your Environment Minister and now Liberal candidate said as much this morning and said the first thing we need to do is to get through this election. So if now is not the time for precise policy, then when is?
We inherited a target that the Conservatives set and did nothing on. We made our way 3/4 of the way to that target in just 4 years, and over the next 11 years, Canada will meet and surpass those targets unless we elect another Conservative government. Canadians need a government that will wake up every morning focused on fighting climate change and committed to a better economic future for everyone. The Conservatives have never shown that commitment. They've never shown up on the fight against climate change. We have demonstrated concretely our leadership on climate change, and we are going to continue to move forward. That's the choice Canadians are facing. Okay. Les conservateurs, sous M. Harper,
Conservatives under Mr. Harper set
sur
targets
lesquels ils n'ont tout simplement jamais agi.
that they never
Depuis
acted
4
on.
ans, on s'est
For
rendu aux
4
3
years
quarts de
now,
nos cibles.
we have been able
Et dans les
to
11 ans à venir, le
get
Canada
three-quarters of the
atteindre
way
et
to those
dépasser
targets.
ces cibles-là.
And in the next 11 years, we will meet and
Canadiens ont
surpass
besoin
those
d'un
targets.
gouvernement
Canadians need a government that will continue
se réveiller à chaque matin
to wake up every
pour
morning,
combattre les changements climatiques, pour
pledging
comprendre
to
comment
fight
bâtir une
climate
économie pour
change
l'avenir
and
de nos enfants
looking
et
at
nos
how to
petits-enfants.
build a better economy for our
conservateurs n'ont
children
jamais
and grandchildren.
démontré
Conservatives
cet engagement,
have never
n'ont
taken
jamais
such a
démontré
pledge, have
aucun
never
désir à être
shown
là
any
dans la
desire
lutte
to be
contre les
there
changements climatiques.
and address climate change.
Minister Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Experts say that what you're announcing today will have very little impact, and what's needed is more immediate changes. Why aren't you doing something like taking the advice from your own advisory panel and implementing zero emissions vehicles, regulations, and mandates that are more near term?
We have moved forward on a broad range of significant and meaningful actions over the past 4 years, whether it's banning single-use plastics, whether it's massive incentives for zero-emission vehicles, whether it's phasing out coal, whether it's protecting larger areas of our land and marine ecosystems, or whether it's putting a price on pollution right across the country. We have done more than any government in the history of this country, and we recognize there is much more to do. I look forward to talking about those next things that we're going to be doing over the course of this week. But today, this investment, this commitment to draw in clean tech innovators from around the world to both generate the solutions that Canada and the world is going to need and benefit from the trillions of dollars in the zero-emission economy of the coming years is a significant step forward that is going to help us fight climate change. The Conservatives, Doug Ford, Andrew Scheer, Jason Kenney, have demonstrated time and time again that they're just the same when it comes to the environment, that they just don't care, and they just don't get it. We do. We are going to continue to step up because we know that this is the issue that matters for our kids and grandkids.
That didn't answer my question, so I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that again. But also, you know, you're setting this target for 2050. Meantime, your own numbers show you're not meeting the 2030 targets that experts say are also too low.
We will be meeting and exceeding our climate targets for 2030. We know that we need to continually increase our ambition, and that's exactly what this government will do. The choice for Canadians is very, very clear. You either go with the Conservatives, who have done nothing to fight climate change and who promise to do nothing to fight climate change, or you go with a government that has continued to lead on the world stage and at home on fighting climate change and will continue to do so in a way that creates jobs, opportunity, and a brighter future for all Canadians. That is the choice in this election.
Monsieur Trudeau, sur le projet GNL Québec,
on the GNL project in Quebec, do you agree with the project even though it will produce emissions? Well, we are doing the necessary environmental assessments at this time, and we recognize that a green transition and a transition to a cleaner economy and cleaner energy requires a number of steps. And we are there to support and participate in projects that will take us to our reduction targets and our need for zero emissions in 2050.
We know that we need to keep moving forward towards cleaner sources of energy, towards greater energy efficiency, and that's why we are evaluating projects on a rigorous scientific and environmental basis as we move forward. That's something that's different from what the Conservatives did, who didn't understand that the way to move forward is by rigorous environmental oversight and partnership with communities, including and especially Indigenous communities. We will continue to understand that that is the way forward in order to get to reducing emissions and getting to net zero by 2050.
Selon vos propres chiffres, vous n'atteignez
According
même pas
to
les
your
cibles de
own
gaz à effet de serre avec votre plan
figures, you're
actuel.
not
Vous
even
ciblez-
meeting
vous avez
the
maintenant des
targets
cibles plus ambitieuses.
at this point. And now
Toujours
you're
pas de
setting even
concret
more
pour comment on va y
ambitious
arriver.
targets.
Donc, à part,
And we don't have
on
any
dit en anglais
concrete
du wishful
explanation
thinking, comment on va
as to
arriver à
how
ce
you're going to
chiffre-là?
get there.
Au
It
contraire,
sounds like
on a
wishful
démontré
thinking.
que
On the
en juste
contrary, we
4
have
ans,
shown that in
on
only
est
4
arrivé à
years,
trois
we've been
quarts,
able to
d'atteindre
go
les
3/4
cibles
of the
sur
way
lesquelles les
towards
conservateurs
meeting
n'avaient
the
rien
targets
fait.
that the
Et dans les
Conservatives
11
didn't
ans
even
à
act
venir,
on.
non
And in the
seulement
next
on va
11 years,
rencontrer
not
ces
only
cibles, mais
will
on
we
va
meet those
largement
targets,
dépasser
but we
ces
will
cibles-là.
surpass
Nous
them.
comprenons qu'il y a
We
toujours
understand
plus à faire
that
et
there
cet
is always more to
engagement
do,
aujourd'hui
and today's
de réduire de la
commitment
moitié
to
les
reducing
impôts
by
des
half
compagnies qui
corporate
travaillent
tax
pour
for
créer des technologies à zéro émission
clean technology, zero
va
emission
nous
clean
amener
technology
non
companies
seulement à
will
participer
lead us
pleinement dans les
to
opportunités économiques,
take full advantage of the economic
nouvellement
opportunities
arrivées
that are part
dans notre monde,
of
mais nous allons
the
aussi
situation,
pouvoir atteindre
and
ces
also
cibles ambitieuses
meet
qui
those
sont
ambitious
nécessaires
targets
pour
that
l'avenir
are
de notre
needed for
planète.
the future of our planet.
Karina Roman, CBC News. You say that you insist that we're going to meet our 2030 targets and in fact surpass them, but not really giving us detail today in full about how that's going to happen. And it's not the first time we've heard a policy in the last week announcement with a lack of detail. How are voters supposed to decide on what you're offering if you don't actually explain the details of what you're offering?
I think the first part is to recognize that we inherited targets from Stephen Harper that he did nothing to meet, because Conservatives don't take action on climate change. And we reached 3/4 of those targets in just 4 years. Now, over the next 11 years, Canada, if we keep on track and choose forward, will continue to meet and surpass those targets. But we recognize there is a need for continued ambition. That's why this announcement today, coupled with the announcements we'll be making over the coming days that will make it very clear to Canadians that our plan will work. The announcement we're making today highlights the opportunities for jobs, for economic growth, while engaging in the trillion-dollar opportunity that is the zero-emission economy technology.
Prime Minister, good morning. David Dingren of Reuters. Your reaction, please, to the court decision today granting BC an injunction against the Alberta law that would enable Edmonton to turn off the taps. How much more complicated is this argument between two major provinces, making the whole idea of ensuring the expansion of TMX goes ahead?
We recognize that the federal government needs to stand up for the national interest, and that will always be our approach. But we also recognize that Canadians expect rigorous environmental oversight, partnership with Indigenous communities, and responsible ways to move forward. I'm not going to engage in internal conflicts between two provinces. My responsibility is to look out for the national interest, and the national interest means making sure we are fighting climate change with a strong, ambitious national plan that will reach and surpass our targets, while at the same time we're securing jobs and a future for our kids and grandkids.
And secondly, your thoughts, please, on the latest... Oops.
Okay. Nous allons toujours
we will always look to ensure the national interest is protected, and that's why we want to have rigor in our environmental assessments and want to do things in partnership with the Indigenous communities. And so we have to continue to reduce our emissions while at the same time creating jobs and opportunities for everyone. We know that Conservative politicians prefer to engage in petty politics rather than taking action to address climate change. So the choice is very clear for Canadians. Moving forward with this Liberal government that's already shown its leadership and will continue to do so, or choosing a Conservative government that is only going to move backwards on climate change.
Your thoughts on the latest developments in the Brexit crisis, the Supreme Court decision?
I have been very clear from the very beginning on my perspective on Brexit as being the wrong choice for the UK, but of course I respect their decision to make their own choices. Andrew Scheer has also been clear on his perspective on Brexit. He always thought it was a great idea. I think we've seen the instability and the challenges that the UK continues to go through as it is wrapped up with this issue. We will continue to stand by our friends both in Europe and in the United Kingdom as they figure out this extremely complex and difficult situation. But we certainly deplore that they are so consumed by this issue that it is interfering with their ability to lead on so many other things where the UK's leadership in the world is so necessary.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, can you explain why your government decided to approve as an honorary consul to Montreal from Syria someone who's been a supporter of Bashar al-Assad and who is called the White Helmets, a terrorist organization?
Obviously, we are quite seized with this issue. I have personally spoken with Minister Freeland this morning, who has assured me that she is looking very carefully into how this has happened and ensure that we have next steps to share with you soon. Okay.
I can confirm that I spoke to the Foreign Affairs Minister this morning, and she assured me that she is trying to find out what happened, and we will have next steps to announce soon.
Singh's writing here, you've said last week you wanted to apologize him directly. That call hasn't happened as far as we know, and will you be trying to see him? He'll be here later today. You're going to try and see him, speak to him about it today?
I can assure you that our offices are working together to coordinate that private conversation.
I can assure you that our teams have been communicating to try and coordinate that private conversation.
Post. Yesterday in Hamilton, you refused to answer a very simple question about the costume that you were wearing in the blackface video obtained by Global News. All you said was that you were being very frank and open with Canadians. How can you say you're being very frank and open with Canadians when all you're saying is you're being very frank and open with Canadians?
I understand the question about the costume, but let me make it very, very clear. There is no situation in which that would be appropriate. The racist history of blackface makes it wrong in any situation, in any circumstance. I did not know that then, and I should have, and I take responsibility for that.
Hi, it's Laurie Culbert with the Vancouver Sun. I have two questions. The first is, why make this announcement today in Burnaby? There are many voters here who are still very upset about the purchase of the pipeline. And secondly, how do you square the promises you've made today with the purchase of that pipeline?
I think Canadians here in Burnaby and right across the country know that we have to fight against climate change with dedication, with seriousness, and in a way that brings all Canadians along with us. We've seen what 10 years of Conservative government did to our positioning on the environment. Canada, at the federal level, showed no leadership under Conservatives because they didn't and they don't take the fight against climate change seriously. We have demonstrated that we have. We have done more over the past 4 years than any government in Canadian history in terms of protecting marine and land areas, investing in a historic oceans protection plan, banning single-use plastics, moving forward with a price on pollution right across the country, phasing out coal, demonstrating investments in zero-emission vehicles and technologies, and in renewables in general. But we recognize there is more to do, and highlighting an extraordinary startup, scientific company like Nano One that is part of that figuring out how to reduce emissions and get to net zero by 2050 is why I'm so glad to be back here in Burnaby. I was at General Fusion just a few buildings over a few years ago for a similar visit and announcement. We know the Canadians right across the country need a government that wakes up every day focused on fighting climate change. We have been that government and will continue to be that government if Canadians make that choice in the coming election. The alternative choice is to go with a government, a Conservative government, that has never been serious about fighting climate change, either for the environment or the future of our economy. That's not what Canadians need.
Mr. Prime Minister, Lauren Gardner from Politico. You invoked Conservatives often in your remarks this morning, but a lot of Vancouver area ridings are competitive for the NDP, for the Greens, largely on the climate question. Both of those parties have climate platforms with targets similar to yours, but with a lot of detail. Why should voters here who rank climate as such a top issue, who are upset about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, why should they trust you and the Liberals on October 21st to deliver on climate change?
We have demonstrated our capacity to deliver over the past 4 years. We are 3/4 of the way towards our targets for 2030, and will surpass them over the next 11 years. We know that fighting climate change, putting a national price on pollution, phasing out plastics, investing in the green economy, phasing out coal, moving forward on renewables, putting a price on pollution across the country, are the big things that needed to be done. And yes, there is much more to do. And the plan that we are putting forward this week will demonstrate how clear that choice is between a Conservative Party that does not act on the fight against climate change, that does not see it as the most important economic issue of our time, and a Liberal government that will continue to move us forward in the right way.
Do you have any thoughts or opinions about the Greens and the NDP's climate platforms?
I think it's really important that there are a lot of Canadians and a lot of different political parties that are talking about the need to fight climate change. But the plan we are putting forward is a concrete and tangible plan that will achieve net zero by 2050, that will achieve and surpass our 2030 targets, and will continue to demonstrate that climate change is a real and pressing challenge to individuals, families, and communities across this country, but is also an opportunity to grow, to innovate, and to have a positive impact on the world. That's what Canadians here in Burnaby and across the country want to see, and that is what we are proposing as a government.
Tessa Vikander from Star Vancouver. Other than your promises about pipeline safety and consultation, what do you have to say to Indigenous voters who are disillusioned by your purchasing of a pipeline and your ousting of Raybould from cabinet?
We are pleased to be working with a large number of Indigenous communities and leaders across Alberta and BC who are interested in becoming partners in the TMX expansion. We recognize that there are strongly held views on both sides of this issue, and we are listening very carefully to people with concerns to minimize those concerns, to demonstrate the kind of partnership and respect that is at the heart of reconciliation. But it does no one any good. It does our environment no good to continue to get billions of dollars worth of discount from selling our resources only to the United States, as opposed to opening up new markets where we will be able to bring in more profits to invest, as we have committed those profits, in a greener future, in that transition towards a net zero economy. That is what the path forward is. Canadians, particularly here in British Columbia, understand that we need to both grow the economy and protect the environment at the same time. The BC government has done that for many years with its world-leading carbon price, and we are continuing to do that because that's what British Columbians, Canadians, and many, many Indigenous peoples also understand is the right path forward.
And specifically about your treatment for Jody Wilson-Raybould for BC Indigenous voters, how do you respond to them?
We continue to work with Indigenous communities across BC. I was pleased to move forward on historic agreements with the Tsilhqot'in. It moved forward on many tangible issues that Indigenous voters are putting forward, that Indigenous Canadians have concerns with. Whether it's the fact that we've eliminated 87 long-term boil water advisories across the country and are fully on track to eliminating the 50 or so more on schedule. We've invested in new schools, in new health centers. We've created partnerships that go to the very relationship that is nation to nation. And we recognize there is more to do, and we will do it. in partnership with Indigenous peoples here in BC and across the country.
Last question, dernière question. Kelvin Gawley, Burnaby Now. You've promised a national housing strategy and billions of dollars to go with it, but if you ask Mike Hurley, the mayor of Burnaby, that money's nowhere to be found. He said he's asked your government many times in vain, and nothing has come through. So what do you have to say to people in Burnaby that are waiting desperately for affordable housing?
I was very happy to sit down with Mayor Mike Hurley just a few months ago to talk about housing, to talk about infrastructure, to talk about the concerns they have around the TMX pipeline. And we've worked together to build and strengthen Burnaby. Our national housing strategy represents $40 billion worth of investments. Our first-time homebuyers plan is something that gives up to 10% off the purchase price of a first home for young families here in Burnaby and across the country. We're going to continue to work with municipalities. I know Mike was very pleased with the doubling of the gas tax transfer that we did this year that led to tangible investments for people in Burnaby. But I continue to look forward to working with Mike and municipal leaders right across the country on responding to the pressing housing challenges. We actually increased the first-time homebuyers benefit, or committing to increase the first-time homebuyers benefit so that more people in the Lower Mainland, including in Burnaby, will be able to access the support they need to buy their first home. This is something that's important for people here, but indeed right across the country. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you all.